Hello, everyone. Hope you had a nice weekend and you're fresh, ready to start the new week. Here we go. So today we're going to talk about how to uh, format your charts. Okay, so once you make a chart, it's a good idea to kind of make them look nice, attractive, but do be a little bit careful. You don't want to just make like bells and whistles. Make changes to make them effective, not just to decorate. Okay. So here you can see that I have a little bit of data. Okay, and if you want, go ahead and pause the video and kind of follow along at your own pace. But let's just take this data here and let's make a chart. So insert, and I think this would work well as a nice column chart. Okay, so there we go. And you can see it, Excel did a pretty nice job organizing it for me. There's Joe, his numbers for day 1, day 2, Tom, Randy, and Sally, day 1 and day 2. Okay. Now, like we said before, probably the most important thing for a chart is a title. Okay, so don't forget to put a title on your charts. Okay, because otherwise we don't know what this is. Well, what are these numbers? Is this like how much they make at their job? Is this how many beers they drink? Is this how many joints they smoke in a month? Right? Let's assume this is like Canadian data. Okay, so joints smoked in a year. Well, let's put a specific year in 2019. Okay, there we go. So yes, this is Canadian data because we're allowed to smoke weed in Canada, so we're much cooler than you, right? Except for Holland. If you're from Holland, we are equally cool, right? It is legal to smoke marijuana in Canada, but like usual, I digress. So just forget that last 30 seconds of talk that I just did. Anyways, this is a measure of stuff. Okay, so immediately having a nice descriptive title tells us what we're looking at, and we can see that Sally is, just a huge heat bag and likes to smoke her life away, right? Just stoned all the time, right? Joe's the occasional smoker we can see, and yeah. So title, don't forget your title. Let's look at other ways that you can edit the different parts of your chart. Now, here we can see chart elements, and you can see the things that are already there. There's the legend already there, the chart title is there, and the axes are there. So the axes talk about these things right here, Joe, Tom. If you want, I can turn them off, and there's without axes, but it doesn't really make much sense. Okay, so there. If you're working on a Mac or a different version of Excel, you might have to access them from here. Okay, so on Windows, conveniently they're here, and they are nice. So some of the useful ones, for example, data labels. Sometimes turning on the data labels can be rather nice so that you can see the exact numbers. Be careful of clutter, because sometimes if you turn those on, you just get a whole bunch of numbers everywhere. It just ends up cluttering your chart. Sometimes numbers aren't necessary. Sometimes you're more interested in like the shape of the graph. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it like a hill? Is it like bumpy? So sometimes the numbers aren't necessary, but sometimes they are nice if you do need that. Okay. There are options to each of these. You can see that when I mouse over them, you get this little arrow. So data labels, some of the options are like where you want to place it. So for example, if you want to place it on the inside, you can. Okay. Be careful about placing on the inside, because sometimes you will compromise the readability of it. Okay. But let me just show you another thing that you can modify. So here, if you click on these, you can see that it highlights all the numbers in them. Same with here. I click on that, it modifies all those. So for example, if I want to modify the font color, I can do that. So let's make it white instead and make it bold, right? Just so it sticks out a little bit more. Let's do the same for these. White, and bold. Okay, you can increase font size, do all that sort of usual stuff. Okay, so clicking there. If you want to isolate just one, just click on it again. Okay, so just clicking on it again will isolate just that one if for some reason you want to highlight that. Maybe I want to highlight Sally's individual one since it's like the biggest. Okay, so maybe I'll increase that font size just to, let's exaggerate it. Oh wow. Okay, so she's a raging smoker. Okay, anyways, other things, I don't generally use many of the others. They are quite specific. Axis titles might be useful sometimes, for example. So for example here we can have number of joints, right, in thousands. So not only, Sally doesn't just smoke 600 joints, she smokes 600,000, right? Actually, this isn't all accurate because I just noticed that I have day 1, day 2, so it doesn't really make sense, but you know, you kind of get what I'm talking about here. Okay, access label here, right? These are students, right? I actually had a friend that was very convinced one time that he wrote better essays when he was stoned. That, yeah, I don't think that worked out for him. Anyways, let's see. Okay, so those are those things there. And other things you can do is just, you know, simply clicking on things. Like, for example, since I have the numbers written directly in the bars, I don't really need these lines. These lines are useful if I need to follow them over and kind of figure out, okay, what that bar corresponds to. So if I follow this line over, it corresponds to 300 and something. But since I have that, I don't need these lines, so I'm just going to get rid of them. Just hitting the cancel key, you can delete them. And I discover that I get a pretty clean look. Okay, and some might even go as far as arguing that since I have the numbers there, I don't even need the numbers there either, so I can just, you know, cancel those as well. Okay, so that's up to you. I'll undo that just to have them there. But yeah, you can modify things just as you like. You can modify the colors of bars if you don't want orange, right? You get the format tab, just like we've seen many times in the Microsoft Office applications. Okay, so if I want them to be like a different color, blue or something like that, or green. Okay, stuff like that. And again, if you want to highlight or isolate just one, right, click on it again, and you can just isolate one if you want to show that one to be a different color. Okay, I usually find it looks kind of funny, but in some cases it can be useful. Okay, and let me show you another thing. I'm just going to create a quick chart right here. Bob, Ron, Dick, and Sue. Okay, and I'm going to put some pretty big numbers here, and I'll show you something that sometimes happens that you need to be careful of. Okay, so these are all big numbers, and they're all fairly close to each other. And what happens if I generate a chart here, I get something like this. Okay, no, that didn't do what I wanted. Maybe because the numbers aren't close enough. Let's try that. No, again, no. Okay, there we go. If the numbers are really close to each other, like this, what Excel does, which is very bad practice, can you notice it? What's wrong with this chart? Right? If I asked you, you know, how is Ron's performance compared to Sue? And you might tell me, oh, Ron really sucked, right? Sue is like so much better than Ron, right? But is that really true? If you actually look at the data, right, Ron's numbers and Sue's numbers are actually pretty close, right? And the problem here is that they don't start this axis at 0, and that's a huge mistake in terms of charts. You always want to start this axis at 0, otherwise you get what's called misleading data. It misleads you to believe that Sue is so much more superior than Rod. So what you want to do is change this, and to change this you right click, okay, and you can format the axis. Okay, so this goes with like all sorts of other things. If you right click on something, you can actually format it. Okay, if I click format axis, I get this, you know, thing that pops up here, and I get a lot of options here. You can see here are axis options. There's other things like alignment and, you know, all sorts of other things. You can actually do with like the fill and lines and whatnot here as well too. But going back to here, you can see the bounds, maximum and minimum. Okay, and the minimum is what we're dealing with here, and we want that at 0. Okay, and now you can see that Ron and Sue are actually very close. You can see Sue is a little bit better, but not that much. Okay, so always start at 0. Other things you might want to modify is these. If you want things to jump by the 10,000, you can see 10,000, 20,000. So let's make it jump by 20,000. Okay, and you can see that. So that's another thing that you can also modify. And I won't go through the other ones. You can play around with those if you want. Okay. Also worth mentioning is that if you don't want to, you know, manually style and you just want to do something quick, there's these quick layouts, for example. Yeah, you can have various ones here that you can choose from. Also available are the ones here, so you have some quick layouts here as well too that you can choose from if you want to just grab something quick. But yeah, I tend to like to format things myself. That way I have more control of how things look, and these are, sometimes they just look terrible. Alright, so let me get rid of this one. Don't need it anymore. That's fulfilled its purpose. Let's go back to this one. And I just want to talk about just because you make a chart doesn't mean that it actually shows something useful or meaningful. Okay, so we have to be really careful about that. Does our chart give a message of something? Does it tell us something useful? Does it highlight something? Does it focus on something? Or is it just a chart for the sake of making a chart and it really doesn't do much? Okay, so let me just mention this. So what does this focus on? If we look at it, we can see that it actually focuses on like the individual people, and we're kind of gauging them in comparison to each other. But let me just show you something. For example, let's go back into the design and let's try this thing right here, switch column and row. So that would essentially switch those. And okay, so now what's the message? Okay, now the message is focused on looking at each day and comparing the different people on each day. So day 1, you can see how people stack up, how people rank, right? And on day 2, you can see that Tom has taken 2nd place here on day 2. Okay, so using the same data, you can have different messages using the same data. Okay, just depending on what you focus on, how you arrange the data will give you slightly different messages. One focusing more on each day, and the other one focusing more on each person. So I've just added a few more days here. Again, if you feel like pausing it and entering this data, you can do so. And I want to include it in my chart. So what I'm actually going to do is you can actually do it from here. I'm just going to grab that and extend it. So that gets included into the chart there. And it's starting to get a little bit cluttered, a little bit messy. Maybe I'll standardize these again. Okay. And it still sort of makes sense. Okay, so you can see, each individual person and their various days as a person. I can switch that up if I want and compare the individual days. Who's the top smoker on each day? I really need to make better examples. Anyways, yeah, who's the top smoker on every day? Here you can see Randy kind of takes over on day 4, whereas Sally pretty much dominates all the other days. So I'm going to actually change the type of chart. Okay, so not only bars, but we can deal with different types of charts too. So let's change the type excuse me, to a line chart. Okay, and let's see what that looks like. Let's just go with the first one, your regular line chart. Let's go with that. And you try to make sense of that, and I start to see that, okay, those numbers are just all whack. I'm going to totally take out those data labels. Okay, and I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to ask you, like, does this chart make sense? Okay, and it should. It should actually make sense, meaning that over time, this is how each person performed. So you can see that most people, or not most people, Joe and Randy, they're 2 lines, that their smoking kind of like increased over the days. Slow and steady wins the race, that sort of thing. Okay, Tom, he started doing that with that trend, right? And then he just kind of like went too hard, and he's like, oh, I can't take this anymore, like I'm so stoned, and then he just kind of dropped off on day 4 there. Sally, she's kind of like an up and down kind of girl, right? She goes pretty hard, right? She's higher than everybody else, but she tends to go like a little bit too hard, and then kind of like has to dial it down a little bit the second day, and then day 3 she's back up again. It's like, okay, I'm feeling good, right? Smoke 2 joints before I smoke 2 joints, and then I smoke 2 more, right? Have you ever heard that song? It's called "Smoke 2 Joints" by Sublime. Anyways, but like Tom, she crashes pretty hard on day 4, and I don't know what happened to her. She's missing after day 4. She got paranoid, right? Went hid in a cave, and nobody's ever seen her again. Okay, so I just want to compare that with switching that up. Okay, let's take off the day labels again, and I'll ask you the same question. Does that make sense? And this time the answer should be no, okay? Because this way does not have a continuous data, right? Joe does not become Tom, so this line doesn't make sense. I can't have data right here on this point in this line. That doesn't correspond to anybody. There's no Joe 0.5, right? So you cannot do that with this type of data. We can only do it with continuous type data, or interval type data, they sometimes call it, right? An interval from day 1 to day 2, and there is data there, right? Theoretically, okay. Yeah, often dealing with time, we can do that. Let me just show you another type. Okay, so let's change that type again, and this time we're going to go to an area chart. And we're not going to go with a normal area, because what's going to happen is a lot of my data is just going to be hidden, since Sally kind of dominates everybody. If hers is in front, she's just going to hide everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a stack. Okay, and we might ask, well, what does that actually tell us? Okay, now you may not have much experience with stacked charts. What it does is it shows individual quantities as well as total quantities. So you can see, judging from the amount of area it takes, you can see how much contribution they have for each of those days. So you can see that Sally has the largest contribution for day 1, followed by Randy, Tom, and Joe, right? And what it also shows is the total. So you can see the total for that day comes out to about 1,600, no, sorry, 1,300 or something like that. Same with day 2, they're individual, areas. There's Sally, there's Randy. and also their total. Day 3 has the highest total, right, and their individual areas as well too. It's not very good at showing exact values, but kind of gives an indication of kind of growing totals. So that's what stacked areas are kind of good for. Okay, let's show another stack. Let's go to the bar, and you can actually stack bars as well too. So let's go to stacked bar right there. Or sorry, stacked columns. Let's go. So stacked columns, again, kind of shows the same thing. It just kind of shows them more distinctly. And definitely you want a stacked column if we're going to do this one where you can't link them. They're not continuous. Okay, so here, day 1, how that stacks up. Sorry, so Joe on each of the day, Tom on each of the days, things like that. And here each day and each person, much like the one we saw before, where the other one showed a more continuous effect. Okay, so like I said, it's all about what kind of message you're trying to convey, right? Are you trying to convey like each day, what are the totals on each day, right? And how do they break up? Or am I trying to convey change over time, right? If it's change over time, I might just go with something like that. Okay, and if I'm dealing with just numbers, right, I might go with something like that, just a comparison of each person on each day. So always think about the message that you're trying to tell and choose your charts and format accordingly. Same with pie charts. Let's try to make a pie chart. Now, you have to be careful with pie charts, because if I make a pie chart, what's going to happen is it's actually only going to show for who is this, right? This actually corresponds to just Joe, right? So pie charts, you can't actually fit everything into one chart, and that'll only show Joe. So what you're going to have to do if you do want to do pie charts is I suggest you do one pie chart for Joe, one pie chart for Tom, and one for Randy. Here's what that would look like. So let's get rid of this. Oops. So what I want to do is take Joe, insert a pie chart, right? Tom, insert a pie chart, right, etc. And then I might want to place them like side by side just so I can see what they're like. Okay. Or I might want to make a pie chart like day 1, day 2. So insert day 1, day 2, insert pie chart. All right, there's one for day 1, and I can make one for day 2. Now, what you'll notice is these things are not coming out right. So like I said before, when that doesn't come out right, you can always go through here and select data, and this is the part that's not right. It displays 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's edit that, and I say this is what I want to display in that legend. Okay. Okay, you can see that changes. Same with this right here. Select data, these things are wrong, edit, and it should show that. Okay, so you can change that, and so you can compare Joe on each day, Tom on each day, Sally on each day, Randy on day 2, and or you can make 4 pie charts, right? Day 1, here are all the people. Day 2, here are all the people. Day 3, here are all the people, etc. And last but not least, if I want to just deal with totals, you can see that I can't do that here. I guess you could use the stacked bars that kind of shows totals, but if I want to show strictly totals, I might have to manually add a column here, and using my summing functions, I can do that, and then take that, insert chart, right? And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, not correct. Let's go edit that, and that's going to correspond to these here. Okay, and again, good titles. I won't bore you with that, but make sure you have good titles there. Make your formatting as you need, as necessary. Okay, so many ways to kind of modify your charts to get the exact message that you want.